Welcome to David's Stories. Today's story follows Thomas, a father who sells his family home, severing ties with his son Ryan's expectations. Through tense confrontations, a symbolic watch, and a trust for his grandson, Max Thomas, sets boundaries while Ryan learns accountability. This journey of pain, forgiveness, and hard-earned redemption reveals how love can mean letting go. Hit subscribe and tap the bell for weekly videos where truth and emotion collide. Share your thoughts below. I read every one. Let's dive in. The air in Java Junction carried the weight of old promises, bitter coffee, and secrets that clung to the walls like damp rot. It was Saturday morning, the kind where the sun doesn't quite break through the haze, leaving the world in a gray veil that feels like it's hiding something. I sat in our old booth by the window, the one where Ryan and I used to share chocolate milkshakes and dreams when he was small enough to believe in both. The vinyl was cracked now, just like us. My coffee was black, no sugar the way I'd learned to drink it after his mother left this world, taking half my heart with her. I checked my father's watch. Its second hand ticked with a relentless rhythm, as if time itself was impatient for what was coming. Ryan was late. 3 minutes to be exact. I'd counted each second, not because I cared about punctuality, but because every delay was a clue, a piece of the puzzle I'd been trying to solve since he turned his back on me. When he finally walked in, there was no smile, no handshake, just a stiff nod that felt like a blade sliding into a sheath. He wore a jacket too thin for the autumn chill, his eyes shadowed like he'd been running from something he couldn't name. He slid into the booth, his movements sharp, deliberate, as if he'd rehearsed this moment. "You sold the house?" he said, skipping any greeting. His voice low but jagged like a wire pulled too tight. "Yes," I said, meeting his gaze. I didn't flinch, though the accusation in his eyes burned hotter than the coffee in my hand. "Why?" he pressed, leaning forward. "You knew we were counting on it. Melissa and I. That house was our future." "Melissa and you don't live there," I said, cutting him off, my voice steady as stone. "It was my home, my decision." His eyes narrowed, a storm brewing behind them. "It wasn't just your home. Mom lived there too. It was ours." I set my cup down, the clink against the saucer louder than it should have been in the quiet diner. "It was ours," I said evenly. "And when she was gone, it became mine to decide what to do with it." I decided. He exhaled hard, leaning back, his hands clenching into fists on the table. The air between us crackled, not with anger alone, but with something older, something that felt like it had been buried in the foundation of that house. I'd always known there was more to Ryan's resentment than money or property. There was a secret he wasn't telling, a shadow that flickered in his eyes when he mentioned his mother. I'd seen it before in the way he'd avoided her room after she passed in, the way he'd stopped asking about the locked drawer in her desk. But today wasn't about her. Not yet. "So what now?" he said, his voice bitter, like he'd already lost something he hadn't named. "You expect me to just figure it out?" "Yes," I said, unflinching. He laughed, a short, hollow sound that didn't reach his eyes. "That's it. No offer to help. No guilt." I reached into my jacket pocket, my fingers brushing against the cold metal of my father's watch, its weight a reminder of promises I'd made to myself. Then I pulled out an envelope sealed with wax the color of dried blood and slid it across the table. Ryan stared at it, his expression shifting from anger to suspicion, as if the envelope might bite. "What's this?" he asked, his voice softer now, uncertain. "Read it when you're alone," I said. "Not here." He didn't touch it right away. His fingers hovered as if the paper carried a curse he wasn't ready to face. Then with a quick motion he shoved it into his jacket, the gesture dismissive, but not careless. We sat in silence, the hum of the diner's refrigerator filling the space between us like a third presence. I sipped my coffee, its bitterness a mirror to the moment. Ryan fidgeted, his knee bouncing under the table, a habit he'd had since he was a boy, back when I thought I could save him from himself. Finally he stood. "Guess that's it." "Guess so," I said. He left without another word, the bell above the door jangling like a warning. I stayed watching the street through the window, the haze outside thickening, as if the world itself was conspiring to obscure what came next. The envelope wasn't just paper. It was a key, though I wasn't sure if Ryan would recognize it. Inside was a letter I'd written in the dead of night, when the house was too quiet, and the ghosts of my choices were too loud. It wasn't an apology or a confession, but a truth I'd buried for years, one that tied Ryan, his mother, and the house to a secret I'd sworn to protect. 2 nights later, my phone lit up at 11:42 p.m. Ryan's name glowing like a beacon in the dark. I was in the guest room at Peter's house, a small space that smelled of cedar and regret. Peter, my oldest friend, had taken me in after I sold the house, his porch, a refuge from the chaos I'd left behind. I answered the silence on the other end, stretching so long I thought he'd hung up. "Dad," he said, finally, his voice cracking like thin ice. I read the letter. I waited, letting the weight of his words settle. The letter wasn't just words on a page, it hinted at something older, something tied to the house and his mother's final days. I'd written just enough to stir his memory, to make him question the stories he'd told himself about her, about us. I could hear him breathing slow and uneven, as if he was standing at the edge of a truth he wasn't ready to face. "It's all true," he said, almost a whisper. "I know," I said. "I don't know what you want me to say." "You don't have to say anything," I told him. "Just don't lie to yourself about how we got here." Another pause, longer this time. I could almost see him sitting in the dim light of whatever cheap motel he and Melissa were holed up in, the letter crumpled in his hand. "Melissa's thinking about leaving," he said, the words slipping out like they'd been waiting for permission. "That's her choice," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "I think I made a mistake," he said, quieter now. "Which one?" I asked, not unkindly. He didn't answer. The line went dead and I set the phone down, the weight of the watch on my wrist heavier than ever. It wasn't just a timepiece, it was a relic passed down from my father, who'd claimed it held more than seconds. He'd spoken of it in hushed tones, saying it carried the pulse of our family, a rhythm that could guide or curse, depending on who wore it. I hadn't believed him then, but now, with Ryan unraveling and the house gone, I wasn't so sure. The next morning I walked to the old house, though it wasn't mine anymore. Miguel and Sofia Rodriguez, the new owners, were already making it their own. The hydrangeas along the porch, my wife's pride, bloomed white and defiant under their care. I stood across the street, hidden by the shadow of a jacaranda tree, its purple petals littering the sidewalk like secrets spilled in haste. The house looked different now, as if it knew I'd betrayed it by letting it go. But there was something else, a faint shimmer in the air like heat rising from asphalt, though the morning was cool. I'd seen it before, the night I signed the deed, over a flicker that seemed to whisper, "Not everything leaves when you sell it." I shook off the thought and turned away, but not before Sophia stepped out, a dish towel in her hands. She didn't see me, but her gaze lingered on the spot where I stood, as if she sensed something the house hadn't told her yet. I walked back to Peter's, the watch ticking louder in my mind than it should have. There was a mystery here, one I'd ignored for too long. The house, the watch, the letter. They were pieces of a puzzle my wife had left behind, one Ryan might be starting to see. That afternoon I met Anna Johnson, the realtor who'd handled the sale. Her office was a small, cluttered space downtown, filled with maps and contracts that smelled of ink and ambition. She greeted me with a cautious smile, her eyes flicking to the watch on my wrist, as if she knew its weight. "You're sure about this?" she asked, sliding a folder across her desk. Inside were the papers for a trust, not for Ryan but for Max, my 6-year-old grandson. The money from the house would sit there, locked away, a promise for a boy too young to know the cost of his father's mistakes. "Yes," I said, signing the last page with a pen that felt too light for the task. "It's the only thing that makes sense." Anna nodded, but her expression shifted, a shadow crossing her face. "Thomas, there's something you should know. When I was at the county clerk's office, I saw Melissa. She was arguing about a car loan, mentioning Ryan's name. It didn't sound good. I thanked her and left the folder under my arm, feeling like a shield. Melissa's troubles weren't mine, but they were another clue, another thread in the mystery of why Ryan had changed so much since his mother's death. The letter I'd given him wasn't just about the house it hinted at, her final days at the things she'd whispered to me when fever took her voice. Things about a promise she'd made, a debt she couldn't pay, and a secret locked in the house that only the watch could unlock. That night I sat on Peter's porch, the air thick with the scent of oak and cichas. The watch gleamed under the porch light, its face catching the glow like it was alive. Peter joined me, his old man groan a familiar sound as he settled into a chair. He didn't ask about Ryan or the house, but his silence was the kind that invites truth. "You ever think about what stays behind?" I asked, my voice low. He tilted his head, his eyes sharp despite the years. "In the house, or in you, both," I said. "There's something about that place, something I didn't see until it was gone." Peter nodded, his gaze drifting to the watch. "Your dad used to say that thing wasn't just for telling time, said it held on to things, memories, promises, maybe more. You believe that I didn't answer?" The watch's second hand ticked steady but insistent, like it was counting down to something I couldn't yet name. I thought of the letter, the way Ryan's voice had cracked when he read it. I thought of the shimmer around the house, the way Sophia had looked at the empty street. And I thought of my wife, her eyes bright with a secret she'd taken to her grave. "Ryan's carrying something," I said finally. "Something he doesn't understand yet." Peter leaned back, his chair creaking. "Then let him carry it. You've done your part, Tom. The house is gone. The watch is yours. Whatever's left, it's his to figure out." I nodded, but the weight of the watch told me otherwise. There was a mystery here, one that tied us all together, me, Ryan, Max, and the ghost of a woman who'd loved us too much to let go. The letter was just the beginning, a spark to light the path. What lay at the end, I didn't know. But as the night settled around us, I felt the first stirrings of a power I hadn't claimed in years, the power to face the truth no matter what it cost. The morning after Ryan's call, I woke to the sound of Peter's coffee maker gurgling like it was trying to confess something. The guest room at his house was small, its walls lined with shelves of old books that smelled of dust and secrets. I checked my father's watch, 7:04 a.m., the second hand moving with a precision that felt almost accusatory. It wasn't just a timepiece anymore. It was a weight, a reminder of the choices I'd made and the ones I still had to face. The letter I'd given Ryan lingered in my mind, its words a spark in a dark room, illuminating just enough to make the shadows feel alive. I dressed and walked to the kitchen where Peter was already nursing a mug, his eyes scanning a newspaper that looked older than both of us. "You sleep?" he asked, not looking up. "Enough," I said, pouring coffee into a chipped mug. The bitterness was familiar, grounding, like a truth you don't want but need. He folded the paper, his gaze settling on the watch. "That thing's louder than it used to be." I didn't answer. He was right, though. The watch's ticking had taken on a new rhythm since I'd sold the house, as if it was counting something other than seconds, something tied to the letter to Ryan, to the shimmer I'd seen in the air around the old place. I'd written the letter in a moment of clarity, or maybe desperation, hinting at a truth about his mother's final days, about a promise she'd made to someone or something that I'd never fully understood. It wasn't the whole story, just enough to make Ryan question the version he'd been carrying. "I'm meeting Anna today," I said, breaking the silence, "to set up the trust." Peter raised an eyebrow. "For the boy, for Max?" I confirmed. "Not Ryan. Not now. Maybe not ever." He nodded, the kind of nod that carries a lifetime of understanding. "You're playing a long game, Tom. Hope you've got the stamina for it." I didn't respond. Stamina wasn't the issue. It was certainty, the kind that comes when you know you're doing the right thing, even if it feels like betrayal. The watch ticked, and I wondered if it agreed. Anna Johnson's office was a fortress of paperwork, every surface covered with folders and maps that seemed to chart lives as much as land. She greeted me with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, her fingers brushing against a pendant at her neck, a small hourglass, its sand frozen in mid-fall. It caught my attention, a flicker of something familiar, but I pushed it aside. "You're sure about this?" she asked, sliding a thick folder across her desk. The papers inside were for a trust, the money from the house sale locked away for Max, my 6-year-old grandson. It was a wall I was building not to keep Ryan out, but to keep Max safe from the mistakes his father couldn't stop making. "Yes," I said, signing the first page. The pen felt heavy, like it was carving more than my name. "It's the only thing that makes sense." Anna watched me, her eyes narrowing slightly as if she saw something I didn't. "Thomas, there's something you should know. I was at the county clerk's office yesterday, and I overheard Melissa arguing about a car loan. She mentioned Ryan's name and something else. Something about a debt that wasn't hers. A debt," I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. The word landed like a stone in still water ripples spreading in my mind. My wife had mentioned a debt in her final days. Her voice fevered, her eyes fixed on the watch as if it held the answer. I'd thought it was delirium, but now with Ryan's anger and the letter's weight, I wasn't so sure. Anna hesitated, her fingers tightening around the pendant. "I didn't catch much. Just that it was old, tied to the house." "She sounded scared, Thomas." I nodded, filing the information away. The house, the watch, the debt, they were pieces of a puzzle I hadn't wanted to solve until now. I signed the remaining papers, each stroke of the pen a declaration of my resolve. The trust wasn't just for Max. It was my way of breaking a cycle, of ensuring that whatever shadow hung over our family wouldn't touch him. But as I left Anna's office, the hourglass pendant lingered in my mind, its frozen sand a mirror to the watch on my wrist. That afternoon I walked to the river, the air sharp with the scent of damp earth and pine. The town was quiet, but there was a hum beneath it, a vibration I couldn't place, like the world was holding its breath. I stopped at the bridge, where the water moved slow and deliberate, reflecting a sky that seemed too heavy to stay aloft. My phone buzzed, a text from Ryan. "Got the job, warehouse, graveyard shift, starts tomorrow." I stared at the words, simple but heavy like stones laid in a path. No exclamation point, no bravado. It was the first adult thing he'd done in years, and it felt like a crack in the wall between us. I typed back, "Good. Call if they need an emergency contact." "They won't," he replied. A beat later. "But thanks." I put the phone away, my shoulders loosening a fraction. The watch ticked, its rhythm steady but insistent, as if it approved. Or warned. I couldn't tell which. 2 days later, Ryan came to Peter's house. The knock was tentative, not the angry thud I'd expected. I opened the door to find him standing on the porch, his jacket still too thin, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. The envelope I'd given him peeked out, creased and worn, like he'd been carrying it as a talisman. "I got your letter out again," he said, his voice low, almost reverent. "Read it 5 times now." "Good," I said, stepping aside to let him in. The air shifted as he crossed the threshold, a faint chill that made the hairs on my neck stand up. Peter's house was warm, but there was something else here. Something that followed Ryan like a shadow. "I still don't agree with everything," he added quickly, his eyes flicking to the watch on my wrist. "But I understand why you did it." I nodded, pouring him a coffee from the pot on the counter. The watch gleamed under the kitchen light, its face catching the glow in a way that felt almost alive. "Sit," I said, gesturing to a chair. He did his movements careful, like he was afraid of breaking something. "You sold the house because it wasn't just a house," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "The letter, it said things about Mom, things I didn't know." I leaned against the counter, my fingers brushing the watch. "What did you read, Ryan?" He swallowed, his eyes distant. "You said she made a promise. To someone. That the house was part of it. That it was why you had to let it go." I didn't confirm or deny. The letter had been deliberately vague, a breadcrumb trail to make him think, to make him question the stories he'd told himself. My wife's final days had been filled with cryptic words about a debt owed to something older than us, about the watch as a key, about the house as a cage. I hadn't believed her then, chalking it up to fever. But the shimmer, I'd seen the weight of the watch, Anna's hourglass pendant, they were starting to align like stars, forming a constellation I couldn't yet name. "What do you think it means?" I asked, watching him closely. He shook his head, his fingers tracing the edge of the envelope. "I don't know. But it's why I was so angry. I thought the house was mine, ours. I didn't know it was something else. It was our home." I said, my voice firm but not unkind. "But it was also a weight. I carried it as long as I could. Now it's gone and you need to carry your own." He nodded, his eyes meeting mine for the first time in years without defiance. "I'm trying, Dad. The job, it's hard, but I'm showing up." "Good," I said. "Keep showing up. That's where it starts." He stood, the envelope still in his hand. "Can I come back? Not for money. Just to talk." "Yes," I said. "But bring something to say." He half smiled, a flicker of the boy he'd been, and left. The door closed with a soft click, but the air didn't settle. The watch ticked louder, its rhythm almost a pulse, as if it was responding to Ryan's departure. I sat at the table, the trust papers in front of me, and felt a certainty I hadn't known in years. The house was gone, but its secrets weren't. The watch was more than metal and glass, it was a keeper of promises, and I was starting to believe it held the key to something I'd been running from. The next day I walked to the old house again, unable to stay away. The hydrangeas were still there, white and defiant, but the shimmer in the air was stronger now, a faint glow that pulsed in time with my watch. Miguel was outside adjusting a lawnmower with the care of a man who respects machines. He looked up, his eyes meeting mine, and for a moment I thought he saw the shimmer too. "You did right," he said, not looking away. "For who?" I asked, my voice sharper than I meant. "For the house," he said, then met my eyes. "And for the man." I nodded, unsure which man he meant. Sophia stepped out, a dish towel in her hands, her smile warm but guarded. "He came by again," she said. "Your son, asked to see the backyard. Nicely this time, said please and thank you." For what, I asked, genuinely puzzled. "For telling me the way you just did," she said, her smile softening. "That's a better report card than most." I managed a smile, the kind that hurts a little because it's true. "Keep the hydrangeas," I said, nodding toward the flowers. They were hers. "We will," she said, and there was a weight to her words, like she knew they carried more than petals. As I walked away, the shimmer followed a faint hum in the air that felt like a question. The watch warmed against my wrist, not with heat, but with something else, something that made my pulse quicken. I stopped under the jacaranda, its petals falling like whispers, and looked back at the house. For a moment I swore I saw a figure in the upstairs window, her window, watching me. But when I blinked, it was gone. That night I dreamed of the watch. Not as it was, but as something else, an hourglass, its sand glowing with a light that pulsed in time with my heartbeat. My wife stood beside it, her eyes bright with fever, her voice clear despite the years. "The debt isn't paid, Thomas," she said. "The house was only the beginning. The watch will show you." I woke with a start, the room dark, except for the faint glow of the watch on the nightstand. It was 3:17 a.m., and the second hand moved with a purpose I couldn't ignore. I picked it up, its weight heavier than it should have been, and turned it over. There, etched into the back, was something I'd never noticed before, a tiny symbol, an hourglass crossed with a key. It was faint, almost invisible, but it was there. I sat up, my heart pounding. The letter, the house, the watch. They weren't just pieces of our family's story. They were part of something older, something that had been waiting for me to see it. I didn't know what it was yet, but I knew one thing: I wasn't just protecting Max with the trust. I was guarding him from something I hadn't yet named, something tied to the debt his mother had whispered about, something the watch was starting to reveal. The warehouse loomed at the edge of town like a forgotten giant, its metal walls streaked with rust that looked like tears in the moonlight. I hadn't been there in years, not since I'd driven Ryan to a summer job when he was 16, back when he still believed hard work was a shortcut to pride. Now at 2:18 a.m., my phone buzzed with a message from him. Shift over. Harder than I thought. Not impossible. No punctuation. No bravado, just a raw honesty that felt like the first brick in a wall he was building himself. I stood on Peter's porch, the air sharp with the scent of oak and cichus, and typed back, "Good. Eat protein. Drink water. You know the drill." The watch on my wrist ticked louder than it should have, its rhythm syncing with the pulse of the night. Since the dream of the hourglass and the faint symbol etched into its back, a key crossed with an hourglass, I couldn't shake the feeling that it was more than a relic. It was a guide, or maybe a judge, counting the moments until a truth I hadn't yet faced revealed itself. Ryan's text was a small victory, but the shimmer I'd seen around the old house, the debt Anna mentioned, and my wife's fevered words lingered like shadows that refused to stay buried. "There's a guy here," Don Ryan texted a minute later. 57. Says late is better than never. Teaching me how to stack pallets without my back hating me. "Listen to Don," I replied. "Men like that know shortcuts that don't cost you later." I set the phone down and leaned against the porch railing, the watch warm against my skin, as if it approved. Or warned. The night was quiet, but there was a hum beneath it, a vibration like the one I'd felt at the river, like the world was whispering something I wasn't ready to hear. Ryan was trying showing up to the graveyard shift, listening to a man like Don, but I knew it wasn't just about the job. There was something else, something tied to the letter to the house, to the debt his mother had spoken of. I'd hinted at it in the letter, just enough to make him question, but not enough to break him. Not yet. The next morning I walked to the old house, drawn by a pull I couldn't explain. The hydrangeas were still there, white and defiant, but the shimmer in the air was stronger now, a faint glow that pulsed in time with the watch. Miguel was outside, testing the blade of his lawnmower with two careful fingers, the way men who respect machines do. He looked up as I approached, his eyes sharp, like he saw more than the man standing before him. "You did right," he said, his voice low but firm. For who, I asked the question, sharper than I meant. For the house, he said, then met my eyes. And for the man. I didn't ask which man he meant. Sophia stepped out, a dish towel in her hands. Her smile warm but tinged with something else, caution maybe, or recognition. "He came by again," she said. "Your son. Asked to see the backyard. Nicely this time. Said please and thank you. For what?" I asked, genuinely puzzled. "For telling me the way you just did," she said, her smile softening. "That's a better report card than most." I nodded, a knot loosening in my chest. "Keep the hydrangeas," I said, glancing at the flowers. They were hers. "We will," she said, and there was a weight to her words, like she knew they carried more than petals. As I turned to leave, the shimmer pulsed again, and for a split second I saw it, a faint outline in the backyard, a figure standing where Ryan had stood, its edges blurring like smoke. I blinked, and it was gone, but the watch burned against my wrist, its ticking a drumbeat I couldn't ignore. That afternoon I drove Ryan to the transitional housing office by the river. The building was squat and gray, its windows smudged with years of neglect. The receptionist, a woman with bangs that looked self-cut and eyes that brooked no nonsense, glanced up as we entered. "We have a wait list," she said, her voice flat. "But you jump if you show proof of employment." Ryan slid a paper across the counter, his warehouse schedule printed in stark black ink. "I have both," he said, his voice steady but not loud, like he was testing its strength. She looked at the paper like it was a passport stamp, then nodded. "A week, maybe sooner, if someone drops. Someone always drops." "Show them you don't," I said to Ryan as we left, standing on the curb by the river. The water moved slow and heavy, reflecting a sky that seemed to hold its breath. Ryan exhaled a sound from somewhere deep in his chest and said, They said a week. I can do a week. You can, I said, and meant it. He looked at the river, his hands in his pockets. Melissa called me selfish. Said I'm exactly like you. I let the words sit, teaching myself not to swat them down. What do you think? He kicked at a mark on the concrete, a smear that looked like a map of nowhere. I think I was selfish in ways I made look like generosity. And I think you gave me furniture and called it love. Both can be true. Both can, I said, and the watch ticked louder as if it agreed. Or judged. I couldn't tell. Over the next week, Ryan's texts came like clockwork, each one a small proof of his resolve. Orientation done. Resume workshop done. Job search group optional penciled in. No flair, no performance, just facts laid out like stones in a path. The second text came at 7:11 a.m. on a Tuesday. Warehouse called. Graveyard shift starts Thursday. I wrote back, call if they need me to confirm anything. They won't, he replied. But thanks. I put the phone down my shoulders, dropping a half-inch. The watch felt lighter too, as if it was watching him as closely as I was. But the mystery lingered, the shimmer, the debt, the figure in the backyard. I went back to the house, unable to stay away. The shimmer was there again, stronger now, a pulse that seemed to emanate from the ground where the hydrangeas grew. I stood across the street, hidden by the jacaranda, and watched as Sophia stepped out, her eyes scanning the air like she felt it too. You see it, don't you? I called out, surprising myself. She froze, then turned, her dish towel twisting in her hands. See what? The air, I said. It moves, like it's alive. She hesitated, then nodded just once. It's been like that since we moved in. Miguel says it's the house remembering. Remembering what I asked, my voice low. She didn't answer right away, her eyes flicking to the watch on my wrist. You tell me, Thomas. I didn't have an answer. Not yet. But as I walked away, the watch burned again, and I knew it wasn't just remembering, it was waiting. 2 nights later, my phone vibrated at 11:19 p.m. A number I didn't recognize, but the prefix matched the warehouse. Mr. Miller, a woman's voice said, crisp but warm. This is Leah in dispatch at Pacific Freight. Your son put you down as an emergency contact. He's here early. I sat up, the watch glowing faintly in the dark. Early, yes, she said, a softness leaking through her professional tone. We don't get many early. Thought it was worth calling to let a parent hear good news. Thank you, I said, and then, because the truth deserved to be spoken, I do want to know. I hung up and lay back, the watches ticking, filling the room like a heartbeat. I slept until 4:30 a.m., the kind of sleep that feels like swallowing sunlight. When I woke, another text from Ryan, a photo of his palm, red and bubbled where a handle had rubbed wrong. What do I do about this? Neoprene gloves, leather palm, I wrote. Harbor Supply on 12th. Buy 2 pairs. Rotate them. Let your hands learn the work without ripping open. Eat protein before you go in, nuts, eggs, tuna if you have to. Water. You'll feel stupid carrying a big bottle. Feel stupid and hydrated. 3 dots, pulsed, stopped, started again. Okay. He didn't ask for money. I didn't offer it. The watch ticked steady and sure, and for the first time I felt like it was counting with me, not against me. The next day I ran into Miguel in front of the old house, his house now, I reminded myself, the corrected truth settling like a stone. He was adjusting the mower, his fingers careful, deliberate. You did right, he said again, not looking up. For who? I asked the question, softer this time. For the house, he said, then met my eyes. And for the man. I nodded, the shimmer pulsing faintly behind him like a veil between worlds. Sophia stepped out, her dish towel a prop for domestic peace. He came by again, she said. Your son. Asked to see the backyard one last time. Nicely. I raised an eyebrow. And I told him no. She said, her voice polite but firm. But he asked nicely. Said please and thank you. That's progress, I said, a smile tugging at my lips. She smiled back, a full-faced smile that warmed my ribs. "We'll keep the hydrangeas," she said, nodding toward the flowers. "Your wife's, yes," I said the word, loosening something inside me. The shimmer pulsed again, and for a moment I saw it. The figure in the backyard, clearer now, a woman's silhouette, her hand raised as if reaching for something. I blinked and she was gone, but the watch burned hotter, its ticking a rhythm I couldn't ignore. That night I dreamed again. The hourglass was back, its sand glowing with a light that pulsed in time with my heartbeat. My wife stood beside it, her eyes bright but not fevered, her voice clear. "The debt isn't paid, Thomas," she said. "The house was only the beginning. The watch knows the way." I woke with a start, the room dark, except for the watch's faint glow. I picked it up, turning it over to study the hourglass key symbol. It seemed to shimmer too, like the air around the house, like the figure in the backyard. I didn't know what it meant, but I knew it was tied to Ryan's journey, to the trust I'd set up for Max, to the promise I'd made to protect them both. The watch wasn't just a relic, it was a key, and I was starting to believe it could unlock something I'd been running from for years. The next morning I walked to the farmer's market, letting the ordinary joy of strangers wash over me. A child cried over a dropped croissant, her grief so pure it made 3 strangers bend down to help. I bought tomatoes I didn't need, and bread I wouldn't finish, the watch ticking softly, as if it approved of the simplicity. Then my phone buzzed, a text from Ryan. "She left. Melissa. Says she needs stability. Says I can't give it to her." I stopped under the jacaranda, its petals falling like confetti after a parade no one wanted to clean. "I'm sorry," I wrote, and meant it. 2 words, no more, because the truth didn't need embellishment. He didn't write back. The watch ticked, and I felt a shift, like the air itself was lighter. Ryan was carrying his weight now, not mine, and the watch seemed to know it. The rain came down in sheets, turning the streets into rivers of silver and shadow. I stood under the awning of Peter's porch, the watch on my wrist ticking louder than the storm, its rhythm a heartbeat that seemed to pulse with the night. Ryan's last text had come an hour ago. "She's gone. Melissa." Packed her things and left. No details, no plea for help, just a fact raw and jagged like a broken bone. I'd replied, "I'm sorry," and meant it, but the words felt small against the weight of what he was carrying. The watch burned against my skin, not with heat, but with something else, something that felt like it was waking up. I'd known Melissa's leaving was coming, the way you know a storm is brewing before the first drop falls. Anna's words about a debt tied to the house echoed in my mind, mingling with the shimmer I'd seen in the backyard, the figure that vanished when I blinked, the hourglass symbol etched into the watch. My wife's voice haunted me too, her fevered whispers about a promise, a debt, a key. The letter I'd given Ryan had stirred something not just in him but in the air itself, as if the truth was a thread pulling taut across time. My phone buzzed again, not a text, but a call. Ryan's name glowed on the screen, and I answered, the rain, a steady roar behind me. "Dad," he said, his voice rough, like he'd been shouting into the void. "I need to see you. Not tomorrow. Now." "Where are you?" I asked, already reaching for my coat. "The diner," he said. "Java Junction. I'm here." I didn't ask why. The watch ticked, urgent and insistent, and I felt a pull not just to Ryan but to something larger, something tied to the house, the letter, the debt. "I'm coming," I said, and hung up. The diner was a beacon in the storm, its neon sign flickering like a dying star. Inside, the air smelled of coffee and grease, the same as it had when Ryan was a boy, when we'd shared milkshakes and stories. He sat in our old booth, his jacket soaked, his hands wrapped around a mug like it was the only thing keeping him grounded. The envelope I'd given him was on the table, creased, and worn, its wax seal broken but still clinging to the paper like a scar. I slid into the booth, the vinyl creaking under my weight. "You okay?" I asked, knowing he wasn't. He didn't look up. "She said I'm poison," he said, his voice low, almost lost in the hum of the diner. Said I took everything she had and gave nothing back. Said, I'm just like you. The words stung not because they were true, but because they weren't entirely false. I leaned back, my fingers brushing the watch, its ticking a steady anchor. What do you think I asked, echoing our last conversation? He exhaled a sound that carried years of regret. I think I was selfish. I think I leaned on her, on the house, on you because it was easier than standing up. I think I broke something, and I don't know how to fix it. I nodded, letting his words settle. The watch pulsed warm and alive as if it heard him. You can't fix what's gone, I said. But you can build something new. He looked up, his eyes red but clear, like he'd cried out the last of his denial. The letter, he said, tapping the envelope. You said Mom made a promise. To someone. Something about the house, about a debt. I keep thinking about it, and it's like I can feel her, Dad. Like she's still here. I froze, the watch burning hotter now, its ticking louder than the rain outside. The figure in the backyard, the shimmer, the dream of the hourglass, they were all pointing to the same truth, one I'd been avoiding since my wife's death. What do you feel? I asked, my voice steady but tight. He shook his head, his fingers tracing the envelope's edge. It's not clear. Like a memory I can't grab. But when I read the letter, it's like she's standing behind me, whispering something I can't hear. I didn't answer right away. The letter had been my way of nudging him toward the truth without breaking him, hints about his mother's promise. The debt tied to the house, the watch as a key. But now, with his words and the watch's pulse, I wondered if I'd stirred something bigger, something that wasn't just ours to carry. Keep listening, I said finally. She's gone, but she left something behind. You're starting to see it. He nodded, his jaw tight. I'm trying, Dad. The job, it's hard, but I'm showing up. I don't want to be poison anymore. You're not, I said, and meant it. The watch ticked softer now, as if it agreed, or forgave. The next morning the rain had stopped, leaving the town slick and gleaming like it had been washed clean of its sins. I walked to the river, needing its quiet to think. The watch was heavy, its hourglass key symbol catching the light as I turned it over in my hand. Ryan's words in the diner had shaken me, not because of his pain, but because of what he'd felt, his mother still here whispering through the letter. I'd seen the figure in the backyard, felt the shimmer, dreamed of the hourglass. Whatever debt she'd spoken of, it wasn't just financial. It was older, deeper, tied to the house and the watch in ways I couldn't yet grasp. My phone buzzed, pulling me from my thoughts. A notification from a local forum, one of those digital town squares where gossip spreads faster than truth. Melissa had posted her words sharp and public. Thomas Miller sold our family home out from under us. Called the cops on Ryan for trying to save it. Some father. The post had likes, shares, comments piling up like kindling. My name was a spark, and the town was ready to burn. I scrolled through the comments, my chest tight but my mind clear. That's cold, one said. Family doesn't do that, said another. But then a name caught my eye, Sarah, Melissa's friend, the one who'd always been kinder than she needed to be. Her comment was long, deliberate. You don't know the whole story. Thomas gave them chances. Ryan made choices. Don't judge what you don't understand. Below it, a reply from Melissa. You're taking his side. After everything, I closed the app, the watch ticking steadily, grounding me. I didn't need to respond. Sarah's words were enough, a small shield against the storm. But the post was a reminder of the weight Ryan carried, not just from me, but from the eyes of a town that loved a story more than the truth. I texted him, saw the post. Don't let it pull you down. Keep showing up. He replied almost instantly. I know. I'm not running. I nodded to myself, the river's slow movement a mirror to my thoughts. The watch pulsed, and for a moment I swore I saw it. The shimmer not at the house but here in the air above the water, a faint glow that pulsed in time with the watch. I blinked, and it was gone, but the feeling lingered like a hand on my shoulder. That afternoon I met Anna at her office again, needing to confirm the trust's details. Her hourglass pendant gleamed under the fluorescent light, its sand still frozen a twin to the symbol on my watch. She noticed my gaze and touched it, a reflex that felt like a confession. "You've seen it," she said, not a question. "Seen what I asked, though, I knew." "The air," she said, her voice low. "Around the house, it moves, like it's watching." I nodded, the watch burning against my wrist. "What do you know about it?" She hesitated, her fingers tightening around the pendant. "When I sold the house, there was something. A clause in the old deed buried in the fine print. It mentioned a debt tied to the land, not the house itself. I thought it was just legalese, but after what Melissa said at the clerk's office, I looked again. It's old Thomas, older than your family." My heart quickened, the watch is ticking a drumbeat now. "What kind of debt, I don't know," she said, her eyes meeting mine. "But it's not about money. It's about something owed, something promised. The house was part of it, but not all of it." I leaned back, the trust papers on her desk feeling heavier than they should. "And the watch?" I asked, lifting my wrist. She looked at it, her expression unreadable. "I don't know. But if it's tied to the house, to her. Be careful, Thomas. Some promises don't end with death." I left her office with more questions than answers, the watch a weight I couldn't ignore. The debt, the shimmer, the figure in the backyard. They were pieces of a puzzle my wife had left behind, one Ryan was starting to see. I didn't know what it meant, but I knew one thing: I wasn't just protecting Max with the trust. I was shielding him from something older, something that might still be waiting. That night, I dreamed again. The hourglass was there, its sand glowing brighter, pulsing like a star about to collapse. My wife stood beside it, her eyes clear, her voice steady. "The debt is yours now, Thomas," she said. "The watch will show you, but you have to choose to see." I woke, my heart pounding, the watch glowing faintly on the nightstand. I picked it up, the hourglass key symbol shimmering like it was alive. I turned it over, and for the first time I noticed something else. A faint inscription, almost invisible in script so small I had to squint. "The keeper holds the hour, but the hour holds the truth." I sat up, the room dark, except for the watch's glow. Ryan was out there carrying his own weight, but he was also carrying hers. Her promise, her debt, her shadow. The letter had been my way of waking him, but now I wondered if I'd woken something else, something that had been sleeping in the house, in the watch, in us. I texted Ryan, "You're not poison. You're building something. Keep going." He replied at dawn, trying, "Thanks for not giving up." The watch ticked softer now, as if it approved, or waited. I didn't know which, but I knew I was ready to find out. The sea at Bandon was a restless beast, its waves crashing against the rocks, with a rhythm that echoed the ticking of my father's watch. I'd moved here a week ago, trading the weight of the old house for a small cottage on a cliff, its windows open to the salt and the stars. The trust for Max was finalized, the money from the house sale locked away for his future, a shield against the mistakes his father and I had made. But the watch on my wrist felt heavier than ever, its hourglass key symbol glinting in the moonlight as if it knew something I didn't. The inscription I'd found: "The keeper holds the hour, but the hour holds the truth," burned in my mind, a riddle I was only beginning to unravel. Ryan's texts had become a steady pulse, like the waves below. Probation done early, he'd written 2 days ago. Anger management class next, signed up yesterday. No fanfare, just proof of a man trying to rebuild himself from the ground up. I'd replied, "Good. Keep showing up." The watch had ticked softer then, as if it approved, but the shimmer I'd seen at the house and the river lingered in my memory, a reminder that the debt my wife had spoken of wasn't paid. Not yet. Tonight I stood on the cliff, the wind sharp against my face, and felt the watch pulse, not with heat, but with something alive, something that seemed to hum in time with the sea. The dreams had grown clearer since I'd moved here, my wife, the hourglass, her voice warning of a debt tied to the house, to the watch, to us. I didn't know what it meant, but I knew it was tied to Ryan's journey, to the letter I'd given him, to the figure I'd seen in the backyard. The watch wasn't just a relic. It was a key, and I was starting to believe it could unlock a truth I'd been running from for years. The next morning I drove to town to meet Ryan at the park near the river, a place where the grass was worn thin by children's feet, and the air carried the faint scent of cedar. He'd asked to meet his text, simple but heavy: need to talk. About Max. About us. I arrived early, the watch ticking steadily its rhythm, a reminder of the promises I'd made to Max, to Ryan, to myself. The park was quiet, the swings swaying gently in the breeze, as if moved by unseen hands. I sat on a bench, the trust papers in a folder beside me, a tangible proof of the boundary I'd set. Ryan arrived on foot, his jacket still too thin, but his shoulders straighter, his steps deliberate. He carried a thermos, the kind you see in the hands of men who work nights and know the value of small comforts. His hands were calloused now, the skin rough from the warehouse, a map of effort etched into his palms. He sat beside me, the thermos between us like a truce. I finished probation. He said, his voice steady but soft. Early. They said I didn't need the full term. Said I showed, what was it, consistent accountability. Good, I said, meeting his eyes. That's not nothing. He nodded, his gaze drifting to the river. I put $500 in Max's trust. First paycheck. It's not much, but it's something. I felt a shift, like the air itself had exhaled. The watch pulsed warm and alive, as if it heard him. It's more than something, I said. It's a start. He looked at me, then his eyes clear but heavy with something unspoken. I'm sorry, Dad, he said, the words raw, like they'd been carved from stone. For the house, for Melissa, for everything. I thought you were cutting me out, but you were cutting me free. I let the words settle, their weight heavier than the trust papers, heavier than the watch. The shimmer was here, too faint, but undeniable, a glow in the air around us, pulsing in time with the watch. I didn't mention it, but I saw it, and I wondered if he did too. You're not free yet, I said, my voice gentle but firm. Freedom's earned, not given. He nodded, his jaw tight. I know, I'm trying. I see that, I said, and meant it. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the watch, its face catching the sunlight, the hourglass key symbol glinting like a secret. Max was with his mother's sister today, but I'd brought the watch for him, a promise for his future. I held it up, letting Ryan see it, letting the weight of it fill the space between us. This was your grandfather's, I said, my voice low. He said it held more than time, said it carried the pulse of our family, the promises we make and keep. I'm saving it for Max, but only if he earns it. If he lives with responsibility, with truth. Ryan stared at the watch, his eyes narrowing, not with anger, but with something else, recognition, maybe, or fear. The letter, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. You said Mom talked about a key, about a debt. Is that it? I didn't answer right away. The shimmer pulsed stronger now, a faint outline forming in the air behind Ryan. The same figure I'd seen in the backyard, a woman, her edges blurred like smoke. Her hand raised as if reaching for the watch. I blinked, and she was gone. But the watch burned hotter, its ticking a drumbeat that seemed to echo in my chest. It might be, I said finally. But it's not yours yet. Not until you're ready. He nodded, his fingers tightening around the thermos. I want to be, he said, and the sincerity in his voice was a blade, sharp and clean. For Max. For me. Then keep going, I said. The watch will wait. That evening I drove to Bandon the Sea, a steady roar in the distance. The cottage was small, its walls bare except for a single photo of Max, his smile wide and unguarded, a reminder of why I'd set the trust, why I'd sold the house. I'd added another trust, this one for the cottage itself, to pass to Max when I was gone. It wasn't just a house. It was a promise, a place where he could stand free of the shadows his father and I had cast. I sat at the kitchen table, the watch in my hand, its inscription glowing faintly in the dim light. The keeper holds the hour, but the hour holds the truth. The dreams had grown stronger here, closer to the sea, as if the salt and the wind were peeling back the layers of the mystery. My wife's voice was clearer now, her warnings sharper. The debt is yours, Thomas. The watch will show you, but you have to choose to see. I turned the watch over, studying the hourglass key symbol. It seemed to pulse not just with light, but with intent, as if it was waiting for me to act. I thought of Ryan, his calloused hands, his $500, his apology. He was building something not just for Max, but for himself, and I felt a pride I hadn't allowed myself in years. But the shimmer, the figure, the debt, they were still there, a puzzle I couldn't solve alone. My phone buzzed, a text from Ryan, signed up for another class. Conflict resolution. Starts next week. Max asked about you, said he wants to see the ocean. I smiled, the watch ticking softly as if it approved. Bring him to Bandon, I wrote. We'll walk the cliffs. The next day I walked to the beach, the sand cold under my feet, the waves a steady rhythm that seemed to sync with the watch. The shimmer was here, too stronger than ever, a glow that pulsed in the air, above the water, forming shapes that vanished when I looked too long. I stopped, the watch burning against my wrist, and closed my eyes. For a moment I felt her, my wife, her presence as real as the salt in the air, her voice a whisper in my mind. The debt is time, Thomas. The watch keeps it, but you pay it. I opened my eyes, the shimmer gone, but the truth clearer. The debt wasn't money or land. It was time, the moments we owe to those we love, to the promises we keep. My wife had made a promise, one she couldn't fulfill, and the watch had been her way of passing it to me. To Ryan. To Max. I walked back to the cottage, the watch a steady weight, and found a letter in my mailbox, not from Ryan, but from Anna. It was short, written in her careful hand. Found something in the deed's history. A name repeated across decades. Eleanor. No last name. Tied to the land, to a promise. Be careful, Thomas. I folded the letter, my heart quickening. Eleanor was my wife's name, but she'd never mentioned a promise tied to the land. The watch ticked louder now, as if it knew. That night Ryan and Max arrived. Max ran to me, his small arms wrapping around my waist, his laughter a sound that cut through the weight of the day. Ryan stood back, his thermos in hand, his eyes softer than I'd ever seen them. He wanted to see you, he said. And I needed to. We walked to the cliff, Max between us, his hand in mine, the watch ticking in time with our steps. The sea was calm tonight, its waves a gentle murmur, but the shimmer was there, faint but persistent, pulsing in the air like a heartbeat. Max pointed to the water, his eyes wide. It's shiny, he said, and I froze, the watch burning hotter. You see it? I asked, my voice low. Yeah, he said, his voice bright. Like stars in the water. Ryan looked at me, his eyes narrowing. You see it too? I nodded, the watches ticking a drumbeat now. It's been following us, I said. Since the house. Since the letter. He swallowed, his hand tightening around the thermos. Mom, he said, not a question but a truth. It's her, isn't it? I didn't answer right away. The shimmer pulsed, and for a moment I saw her, the figure clearer now. Her face like my wife's, but softer, younger. Her hand holding an hourglass that glowed with the same light as the watch. She didn't speak, but her eyes held mine, and I felt it. The debt. The promise, the truth she'd left behind. Maybe, I said finally. But it's not just her. It's us. What we owe each other. Ryan nodded, his jaw tight but his eyes clear. I'm trying, Dad. For Max. For her. I know, I said, and placed the watch in Max's small hand. This is for you one day. When you're ready. When you know what it means to keep a promise. Max held it. His eyes wide, the watch glowing faintly in his palm. Ryan watched, his expression a mix of pride and pain. And I knew he understood. The watch wasn't his yet, but it could be if he kept building, kept showing up. We stood there, the three of us, the sea. A steady pulse, the shimmer fading into the night. The watch ticked softer now, as if it had found its rhythm. I didn't know the full truth of the debt of the promise of the shimmer, but I knew one thing: we were paying it moment by moment, choice by choice. Ryan's apology. His $500, his calloused hands. They were payments small but real toward a debt older than us all. As we walked back to the cottage, Max clutching the watch, Ryan's hand on his shoulder, I felt a peace I hadn't known in years. The watch was a key, but it was also a promise, one I'd keep for Max, for Ryan, for her. The shimmer lingered, a faint glow in the air, but it didn't scare me anymore. It was a guide leading us toward a truth we were ready to face.